President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State and the subsequent removal of the democratically elected governor, deputy governor, and members of the State House of Assembly for 6 months in the first instance, according to him. These actions constitute an executive coup against the people of Rivers State, a flagrant abuse of executive power, a violation of Nigeria's constitutional order, and an undermining of democracy. We agree that it is the prerogative of the President of Nigeria to declare a state of emergency, and that the President can exercise the legal authority to make such a declaration under specific conditions as outlined in the Constitution. However, this power is not absolute. It is subject to legislative oversight and judicial review to prevent abuse, as has happened in this instance. Contrary to the Constitution, we have witnessed abuse of power, disregard of due process, and the violation of democratic principles with the President's imposition of a state of emergency and appointment of an unconstitutional administrator in Rivers State, and the National Assembly's complicity in ratifying unconstitutionality. This is clearly a travesty on the rule of law and contrary to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We have noted that there are several constitutional violations, which include, but are not limited to: 1, abuse of presidential prerogative, Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution. While the President has the legal authority to declare a state of emergency under Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, this power is not a blank check for dictatorship. The sequence of events, including the pipeline explosions, which are now doubtful, and the impeachment proceedings against the governor, makes the call for a state of emergency suspicious. 2, unconstitutional and opaque actions of the National Assembly. Section 305(2) requires that any proclamation for a state of emergency be submitted to the National Assembly for approval within 2 days, or 10 days if the National Assembly is not in session, without which the emergency ceases to have effect. The Constitution requires 2/3 of each chamber of the National Assembly to ratify the order. This means 73 out of 109 senators and 240 out of 360 members of the House of Representatives. Yesterday, the House of Representatives approved the state of emergency by voice vote. By voice vote. While a member raised a point of order from the floor, he was silenced. In the Senate, they had a closed-door executive session. How can citizens ensure the provisions of the constitutions were followed? The presidency made matters worse by applauding the clear desecration of the Nigerian Constitution. The judiciary must immediately strike down this blatant violation of Nigeria's constitutional democracy. 3, illegitimate removal of elected officials, Section 188, and federalism provisions. The Constitution does not support the unilateral dismissal of Rivers State elected leaders, or the elected leaders of any other state for that matter, which is an egregious violation of Nigeria's federal structure. Section 188 sets out the due process for the removal of a governor, which requires due process legislative inquiry, and judicial oversight. No such process occurred. Chapters VI and VII protect the autonomy of state governments within Nigeria's federal structure. The president's actions set a dangerous precedent. If left unchallenged, they will set the stage for the arbitrary dismissal of any elected state government at the president's whim, rendering Nigeria's democracy and people's mandate meaningless. The president does not have the power to arbitrarily dismiss state officials. His actions are dictatorial and illegal and must be resisted by all Nigerians. Our demands. 1, immediate reversal of the state of emergency. We demand an immediate reversal of the unconstitutional removal of the governor, deputy governor, and House of Assembly members in Rivers State. For the simple reason, as we have stated above, that the president does not have the constitutional authority to remove these officials. 2, legislative oversight. We call on members of the National Assembly who were not part of yesterday's charade to speak up against the violation of the Constitution. We also call on Nigerians to make their displeasure known to their representatives. The National Assembly is the highest lawmaking body in the country, and they must not be allowed to get away with choosing which of Nigerians' laws they want to obey and when they will obey it. 3, judiciary operating on merit. There will be several lawsuits in the coming days, and I'm sure we all know that, if this matter is not quickly addressed by the National Assembly and the executive branch. We require the judiciary to review each case on its merit and not rely on technicalities to dismiss the cases. 4, restoration of constitutional order. We urge all stakeholders, including the judiciary, civil society, and the international community, to closely monitor the situation in Rivers State and ensure that any emergency measures are strictly in line with constitutional and democratic principles. 5, citizens' vigilance. We urge Nigerians to leverage available channels to demand a reversal of the state of emergency in Rivers State and push for a functional democracy. Nigerians must not stay silent. We urge citizens to write to their representatives, mobilize within their communities, and demand action through peaceful protests and other lawful means. History has shown that when unconstitutional acts like this go unchallenged, they become the norm. If Rivers is silenced today, no state is safe tomorrow. In conclusion, we remain committed to upholding the Constitution, defending democratic governance, and ensuring that the rule of law prevails in Nigeria. We call on the Nigerian government to live up to its mandate according to the Nigerian Constitution and not be a cog in the wheel that threatens the democratic rights of the people of Rivers State and all Nigerians. We stand in solidarity with the people of Rivers State as they demand the restoration of constitutional order within the ambit of the law. We stand united in defense of our constitutional order and democratic ideals. The removal of elected officials under the guise of emergency powers is unconstitutional and must be rejected in the strongest possible terms. I thank you all for listening.
And for those of them who are supporting the state of emergency that has been put on, and the fact that a duly elected governor was taken away and saying that, oh, he had to come in to do something. If you say there are two parties in a crisis and they haven't stopped, why is it that one is the one that is being punished? But anyway, that's a question we need to ponder for the elders that are coming out to speak on this. Coming back to what we've seen in the last a few days, we've seen the impeachment threat being made. We also saw the State House of Assembly, coming out to put the impeachment notice to the governor. And then the next thing, there were pipeline vandalization that had happened. And one of the things that people have come to say is to say that the Fubara administration hasn't done well to protect those pipelines. And I think we need to go back to our Constitution and find out, when it comes to the protection of lives and properties, on whom is it invested? Is it a governor? Or is it the commander-in-chief? And who should take responsibility for protecting not only lives, but also properties of our nation? March 18, 2025, you saw the declaration that came in of a state of emergency in Rivers State. And Mr. Bola Ahmed Tinubu cited disturbing incidents of vandalization of pipelines by some militants without the governor taking any action to curtail them. The governor, what action is he supposed to take to curtail them? The commander-in-chief, whoever sits as and acts as the commander-in-chief, is the one that is supposed to ensure that lives and properties are protected. And if we said the issue of vandalization, it's a reason why there will be a state of emergency imposed on a state in Nigeria, then the question I will ask also, is there any state in Nigeria that wouldn't have a state of emergency if this is what now leads to a state of emergency? But we have lawyers that are going to look at the Section 305 and go on that particular one. But beyond that is the strange occurrence in a democracy where a duly elected governor is dismissed, stripped of his powers, given to him by the people of his state. And you have a sole administrator being imposed on the state. In a democracy, remember, the democracy that a lot of people fought for and some died for us to have. That is not a democracy. And then the next line where people, Nigerians and citizens, were hopeful that, this rascality, this constitutional rascality that has happened, that it was going to be checked. It's where we have the legislative arm of government. The National Assembly was supposed to be that other resort of the citizens. They're supposed to be the protectors of our democracy. But unfortunately, March 20, 2025, it didn't prove to be so. The National Assembly, that is supposed to be the mouthpiece and the voices of the people, decided that it was not going to be that. The Senate, 109 members of them, or should we say 108, since they decided that they were going to suspend someone whom they did not elect. And House of Representatives, 360 members, convened. But the question is, did they actually convene? Was there a head count? Do we know whether the numbers that were said to be were actually the numbers that were said to be there? Because we needed a two-third for this to even be approved. Even what the Constitution had agreed, talk less of the part that is unconstitutional. And then they declared this, they approved the emergency declaration, but instead of going through the process, because processes are very important, we must understand that. Processes are very important that every time the process has to be followed, the rule of law has to be followed. The two-thirds, we needed to have head count. The people, the senators, the lawmakers who are supporting this ought to append their signature. What are they afraid of? Why are we having a vote voice in something that is as important as this? First of all, we have the House of Representatives using a voice vote, bypassing the constitutionally mandated recorded counts to verify the two-thirds threshold. And then, of course, you've had the Senate doing the same thing. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow citizens, we must understand that under a democracy, the Constitution is sacrosanct, and the Constitution must be followed the way it is. Thank you.
Declare a state of emergency. There is no doubt that Section 305 has laid down the procedure for any president within a federation to declare a state of emergency. But in this particular case, what we should be asking ourselves is very simple. Did the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria follow the due process and the rule of law? Which I would clearly say, no, it's not. And why would I say that? Okay, Section 305 of this Constitution, I'll try as much as possible not to bore you because there are several processes, provisions under that. And first and foremost, the president can declare a state of emergency, if the country is at war, if there is imminent situation of war or invasion, as the situation would be. If I was going to liken the situations in this kind of scenario, I may say yes, it was in order that the president, Goodluck Jonathan administration, had ordered a state of emergency in I think it's Borno State and all that, which makes more sense. Now, if you look further into Section 305, you see where it says that if there is a likelihood of public safety and public order being affected, and then there is something I love about the drafters of the Constitution, which I believe that a lot of people try to miss it because of the mischief in their hearts. Now, it says that the public safety and public order must be threatened to the extent, that is the word, extent. It says to the extent that it requires an extraordinary measure for the restoration of peace and order. So what question we as lawyers and as people who really believe in the democracy of a nation like Nigeria should be asking ourselves, the situation in Rivers State, has it gotten to the point where the public safety and public order is being threatened to the extent that it requires extraordinary measures? I am aware that the president had given a reason stating that there has been vandalization of pipelines. But the question is, how often has pipelines been vandalized in Nigeria, and how often has the president of a democratic nation actually issued a state of emergency?
Democracy, where a president abrogates to himself the unilateral decision to remove a sitting governor, the governor's deputy, and the whole House of Assembly of a state. Basically, what it means to civil society, to you and to me, is that he nullified, he desecrated your vote and my vote. And that cannot stand. Furthermore, in a time of democracy, where people, including our president, as chairperson of ECOWAS, spoke against a military coup, we see that bringing in a retired military person as sole administrator and deploying 10,000 soldiers sends a message that perhaps the president is saying that democracy does not work. Furthermore, it has been stated here clearly that the Constitution does not allow the president to remove somebody, not just one person, the people that we elected, while protecting the person he appointed.